Let's head back now to the Harvey Weinstein trial happening in Lower Manhattan, where the jury is deliberating for a second day to determine whether or not Weinstein is guilty or not guilty of 5 separate charges related to 2 primary accusers. The question is, what happens to Weinstein if he's convicted, and if so, once he's sentenced? Here to help us understand that end of the spectrum is Justin Paperny. He is a prison consultant out of California, and he's joining us this morning here on the Law and Crime Network. Justin, good morning.
Good morning.
So tell us about your work. How did you get into it, and what exactly do you do helping people adjust to prison, as I understand it?
So I began building this business while I was on the inside of a federal prison, reflecting on all the bad decisions I made leading up to sentencing and my preparations for prison. So while in prison, I interviewed my fellow prisoners who also regretted how they prepared, working with their lawyers, speaking openly and honestly about their conduct. So I sensed an opportunity to help others and myself, began documenting my experience, wrote my first book, Lessons from Prison, and then upon my release in 2009, began preparing white-collar defendants and all defendants for sentencing and for life in federal prison.
So as to Harvey Weinstein, let's assume, and again, we don't know what the jury is going to do once the verdict ultimately comes down, assuming that there is one, assuming that this is not a hung jury. What happens to Harvey Weinstein if there's a guilty verdict?
Well, if he's convicted, he will immediately be remanded. I don't sense this is the type of case where he will be able to self-surrender to prison, as is the case with many federal and state defendants. So he'll be remanded custody through a very difficult system, strip searched, reprimanded and made fun of by guards, potentially ostracized by other prisoners, looking to be extorted and taken advantage of by other prisoners because he's so high profile. In federal prison or state prison, there are people who have been there 10, 20, 30 years, and their prison reputation is important to them, and they could be looking to make an example out of him. So it's incumbent for Mr. Weinstein or any defendant, federal or state, to understand life on the inside. If I were guiding him, besides trying to win at trial, I would be guiding him, if you lose, to understand life on the inside and how he can ensure that matters are not made worse, because without proper preparations, life can get worse. That much I can tell you.
So if he were sitting here, what exactly would you tell him beyond the fear that other inmates may be out to get him?
I would remind him that there are people in his network that still love and support him and who want him to succeed and will stand by him regardless. And for that reason, he needs to adjust in prison with them in mind, not responding to prisoners who may call him out in the chow hall, not prisoners, prisoners may be looking to make an example out of him. He's got to remain humble and deferential and create an environment that keeps him away from as many prisoners as possible. If that means waking up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and having a few hours alone while the dorm sleeps, great. If that's going to bed at 6 o'clock every night, so he's not in the TV room where a lot of trouble takes place, great. He's got to do his job. He's got to avoid staff, and he's got to create a routine that he can be proud of. And if he can do that, he'll avoid problems that people like these types of crimes can face. It's not going to happen by accident. He's going to have to invest the time and understand that everything he thinks and says and does on the inside will have repercussions for a prisoner who may be looking to make an example out of him. He's got to prepare like anyone else.
I think I heard you say avoid staff. Why does he need to avoid staff?
As I wrote in Lessons from Prison, many prisoners tend to better associate with staff than they may the prisoners with whom they're serving time. So if he's speaking with staff, hi, how are you? I loved your movies. Wow, the great movies you make. And 30 minutes later, a prisoner's locker is getting searched. That prisoner may deduce, wasn't the new prisoner, the celebrity, speaking to staff? Maybe he said something to the staff member that I have an iPhone or drugs or vaping or marijuana or double from In-N-Out in my locker. Then they're going to deduce he said something. And as I wrote in Lessons from Prison, they're cooperating informants in prison. Many of them have big problems. And when caught, there could be fights, feces in the sheets, urine in the sheets. You've got to avoid staff. They're not your friends. They're paid to lock you up. And you've got to understand that detail. Federal prison or state prison is a much different dynamic than what we may see in free society, to use some prison parlance for you.
Oh, certainly, yes. And in many of the cases we cover here, we watch these jailhouse snitches ready to jump and testify, usually in return for a deal for doing so. So after conviction, though, the fear is that there may be some other retribution because people might look at Weinstein as a snitch just to get somebody in trouble with the internal rules. That's an interesting point. Now, again, this is all hypothetical, of course. This is if there is a conviction, and then if there's a sentence of some sort with lengthy incarceration or maybe even a minor incarceration. Here we're talking about state prison, where this is state charges that Harvey Weinstein faces. If you were to sort of look into your experience as to the sort of facility where Weinstein might wind up, what sort of facility might he wind up in?
Well, it would be different in a state case, and what could be if he's convicted of rape, which I know is one of the charges. He's not going to serve time in one of those minimum security cushy camps that people love to call white collar country club camps without fences or barbed wire. There's a very good chance he'll be locked in the fences with razor coil. He'll be in with prisoners who are serving time for violent offenses, for murder, to rape, to other horrific things. So he's in with a different type of audience than maybe what I was serving time in a minimum security camp, where everyone had a clearly defined release date with 10 years or less. So besides that, he may be in a jail or in a cell inside of the fences and barbed wire. He'll be in with people who have served decades in prison for violent crimes. And again, if I were guiding him right now, or if he were listening, I'd be guiding him not just on how to best prepare for this trial, which his lawyers are doing the best they can. It's what do you want your life to look like in prison, and how do you ensure that matters are not made worse? And that begins with understanding his fellow prisoners, their mindset, and how he can adjust to this very warped world of confinement.
Harvey Weinstein is a famous man. He's a wealthy man. His finances are obviously shaky given the accusations and whatnot. But is this somebody that could potentially receive special treatment? Is he going to get his own cell? Is he going to get basically his own guards? What might that look like? How does it change if you're Harvey Weinstein, not just the average defendant sitting in prison somewhere in New York?
Well, the prison systems, both state and federal, try to do a decent job of not singling out prisoners or giving them special treatment because of their wealth or who they may know. Now, if there's a security issue, and prison systems care about two things, keeping costs down and the security of the institution. We saw what happened with Epstein in New York and the security breakdown. Okay, so if they feel that his security is threatened and that could lead to problems, they could move him to protective custody, where he could essentially serve his time in segregation, which is the special housing unit, though I can assure you there's nothing special about it. You're locked in a concrete bunker 23 hours a day. So staff may determine this guy's too high risk, too many problems. He's got a mark on his back for so many fellow prisoners. We don't have time to deal with this. We're going to put him in protective custody and potentially move him to the SHU, which really can be a miserable experience. The benefit is you get a lot of time to yourself, so it's easier to avoid problems. Spend a lot of time alone, only with your thoughts to reflect on how I got here. And that can be very humbling and difficult for prisoners.
And I know, Justin, you're watching from the West Coast. New York's a big state. We have a huge city downstate here. We've got a lot of open land upstate. It's mountains, it's farms and whatnot. And I don't know if you've worked directly in the New York State system, but where might Weinstein be placed? Do you put him way up in the Adirondacks, in the mountains? Do you keep him down here closer to the city? Do you put him out west in western New York, out near Rochester or Buffalo, somewhere out in that end of the state where it's a lot more agricultural?
So the state system, to a degree, is going to mirror what they do federally, which is they're going to try to place him in a prison that's closest to his home. Though if they determine it's too much of a security threat and it's not in the interest of the prison system, namely it could be a security threat, they may ship him to the bottom. It's really going to come down to what's in the best interest of him and avoiding violence. So I've had clients, state and federal, be shipped as far away as possible due to the attention in the case. In this case, there won't be a co-defendant in a local prison, so that isn't something he has to worry about. So while the New York State system is going to say they're going to do all they can for Mr. Weinstein, if convicted, to send him to a prison that's closest to his family so they can visit, there's a little bit of happy talk there. There's a little bit of let's understand the reality of the situation, which is they're going to focus on security first, not convenience for him, and is this the closest prison to his beautiful home in Manhattan? Okay, so if they got to send him to Rochester, bye-bye. That's where he's going if it's in the interest of the security of the institution.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Any last thoughts, Justin, as again, if you were seated across from Harvey Weinstein right now, your final thoughts, what would your last piece of advice be for him?
He should remember that this experience is hard love and support him. So if he's in prison, he should work to create a record that would make those who love and support him proud, share some of his life lessons with other prisoners who have not had any of the benefits financially, professionally that he had achieved at one time. And he's in a position to give back and even mentor, dare I say it, and recognize the time in prison doesn't have to be a waste. His body may be there, but his mind is free to work and contribute back to his fellow prisoners and community. No different from what I did each day on the inside.
Bottom line, be a model inmate. That's the advice for Harvey Weinstein. Justin Paperny, appreciate the time. Prison consultant out of California, speaking hypothetically about what might happen if Harvey Weinstein is convicted and then sent to prison. We'll take a break right now here on the Law and Crime Network. We'll be back with live trial coverage after this.